future's now, old man.
What it do, Pikachu? This is the Future First podcast where we're helping you win today with the Future First mindset. I'm Jmac. I'm here with Jose, Jason's Black Polo. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. How you been?
Oh man, I'm good. Watched the Hall of Fame game a little bit today. Caught the first couple drives. Football's back, man. It was like just the announcer's voice. I was like, okay, it's football season.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Harbaugh's just that wild man that I don't think anybody told him. But for him to come out and announce that like his big shiny new toys are gonna be out there with Trey Lance, who in the dynasty community still has that cult following, was pretty hype. I didn't get to watch any of it. I was stuck at a freaking parent meeting, school meeting for some sports thing for my son that went like 2 hours. So I didn't get to catch any of it. I just was following a little bit along on Twitter, but seemed pretty hype. Some players got a nice little buzz going, so that's always fun. But yeah, man, like you said, football's officially back.
Yeah.
We're just weeks away now.
Yeah, it's literally weeks away. Yeah, Omarion Hampton had a couple runs. Nothing spectacular, but he looked good. So that'll be exciting. Yeah, Isaac Tesla popped off, had a couple big catches. So that was something to watch. But yeah, man, I mean, it feels weird to roll it back to training camp now, but we are talking about training camp. That's kind of what's overtaking all of our Twitter feeds and all our socials. Yeah, man, it's overreaction season. It's hype season. It's all the good stuff that we live for here. You got any favorites? Overreactions here?
Yeah, I mean, my thing was just like the whole thing is overreaction. It's like everybody until today, everybody's just yearning for some football, yearning for some news, for something to latch on to. So whether it's Justin Fields, who you're going to talk about, any of the other players, like, oh, this guy got carted off, this guy's knee, this guy is, we got Trevor Lawrence stats about his first week in training camp. Like, it's wild. I mean, beat reporters and some of these other, Twitter accounts have made a living reporting some of this stuff that ends up being completely nothing. But I mean, it's fun. I mean, you get to see your players make awesome catches in shorts without pads on. Like, if we don't take the combine all that seriously because they're not running in pads, it's kind of funny that then we get into training camp and everybody's like, oh my gosh, this 7th round dude just made a crazy catch against the third string, like that sort of thing. But I mean, there's stuff to be gained. There's definitely some things that are interesting, but in overall, to me, it's just kind of one big giant overreaction. What about you?
Yeah, the Justin Fields one is always fun. I mean, it's just because it's someone the cart comes out and the red flags go up. And I mean, luckily it wasn't anything big. I think it was a dislocated toe, which actually, I mean, I don't know, sounds terrible to me. Like I don't want a dislocated toe. It'll probably affect it and linger into the season. But another one is the Matthew Golden. I see it all the time. Like, oh, he's running this route, he's making this catches, and I always watch the videos and they're in shorts and they don't even have pads on yet. And I'm like, come on, guys, like we can't be saying Matthew. I know he was a first round pick. I don't know. I'm also like the biggest Matthew Golden doubter. So
Yeah, I mean, it's like especially with wide receivers, it's like the corner can barely press. He's barely able to touch. It's like 7-on-7, so there's just way more space on the field. It's like if the wide receiver isn't winning, it's probably bad. Like it's probably not a good thing for the receiver if he's
yeah,
not
right.
able to win in that situation. So yeah, I mean, my favorite has just been the AR experience. Like everything is just like Danny Dimes until we got into training camp, and it seems like we're all just like where I am at least all wheels up on AR. I don't even think I own him in any leagues anymore, but it's just fun because it's just one of those players that it's like, man, if he can actually be like a serviceable passer, man, can he be really fun for fantasy football and dynasty? For those anybody out there who's still holding on to their shares, like, hey, you at the beginning of this offseason, you thought maybe he's never going to play again, and now it's looking like he might be the starter going into week 1. So that's fun.
Yeah, no, that is fun one. I actually took over a league and it's a contract league, and I have AR on my team. And I was a little shocked when I came in and saw the previous manager signed him on contract through 2031. Um, so I could use a little AR hype now. But no, I like the Egbuka hype. I think I was high on him coming in, and I actually didn't get him in a lot of dynasty. But I have been taking him in a lot of seasonal best ball redraft, um, hoping that he can actually pop off with Godwin, who's getting a slow start to the season. So I like that one. Baker came out on Egbuka on I think it was the New Heights podcast with the Kelsey brothers, and he was saying Egbuka is the real deal. And like if you watch the video, you can see it in his face, like he's like just dead serious, and like you can see the astonishment, like this guy coming in, like you can just how you can just tell, like when the guys are winning in the air and they know where to stop and sit down, and he's got it all. And so like that just makes me, watching his quarterback say that about him, and then just seeing how the situation is developing over there. I think it's going to be wheels up for Egbuka. So yeah, I think that's probably my favorite hype piece. I don't know. Do you have any big feelings on Egbuka or the whole Buccaneers wide receivers?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think coming out, I to me like Egbuka, I think had to get a different landing spot. At least when a lot of rookie drafts were going on, right? We all thought Godwin. I don't think the news of how kind of set back it was. Everybody was like, "Oh, he's a great pick. Maybe back half and then into next year, Godwin, Mike Evans." I wouldn't be surprised if Egbuka is a better fantasy asset than Tet, just because of the team he's on, right? Maybe even now, like right away. So I love Egbuka. I did get a few shares of him myself, and I'm more excited. Especially on a couple rebuilders that I got him on. It's nice to have those assets maybe turning into what you want faster. But yeah, I mean, that's always great. And Baker's, the man. He's awesome person to just listen to talk. So him saying that about Ibuka, he doesn't feel like the type of guy that would just say that to say that, right? Like it seems like he was genuinely impressed, like you said. And then you move on from from player talk to coach speak. To me, like anytime John Harbaugh's talking, man, it's just worth listening to. Like that guy's just a maniac. We've all seen it. He's up in the at the podium with cleats on, just ready to go tackle Amari and Hampton if he has to. Like it's a wild man. So anything he says, he loves Herbert. We all seen the meme picture of him looking through curtains. I don't know why is there curtains at training camp? I don't know, but John Harbaugh would be the one to peek through it like a weirdo. Like just anything Coach speak John Harbaugh says is my thing to want to be listening to. So, what about yours? I mean,
Yeah, man, we should get a drop set up here where Harbaugh just peeks through the curtains, and then you get the Mortal Kombat woohoo. That'd be a
yeah,
good
you
one.
peek right there between us, right here, like just.
I'll see if I can set that up. Yeah, for my favorite coach speak, it's Sean Payton on my guy RJ. He was saying that he had a run today that was something. We all turned in and looked at each other. He's doing exceptional, and I love to hear it. I mean, it's Sean Payton, though. It's hard. His coach speak is, if you look at the coach speak index, great follow, by the way. It's bad. He just talks up all of his players, so it's hard to buy anything. But when he's talking about, you know, looking impressed and like describing an interaction where they're just looking at each other, it feels a little more real to me. And knowing that the draft capital spent on him, I know J.K. Dobbins is going to have a role, and it's probably gonna be a more hindrance on RJ than it is, but it's good to hear the hype coming out there. But yeah, man, we are on YouTube. Like and subscribe. We're also on Spotify now. So I think here we'll try and get some some more audio podcast platforms set up too. And as we do, make sure to drop us a review and follow along there. We got another banger episode teed up today. We got some stats and vibes. Stats and vibes are back. And then we're going to talk about some Bestball Dynasty and a little bit of wisdom that we can share. You know what it is, how it's different from normal lineup dynasty, and some tips to be the best ball or best baller. But first, a quick hit. We're going to talk about some worrisome camp injuries here because there have been a few, and they are ones to track going forward here. And I think a big one for me, because I have him in quite a few dynasty spots here, is Matt Stafford. He's dealing with a back spasms or back, and he's had injuries in the past. He's had surgery on his back. The dude's, as old as you and me, which, hey, it's not that old. It's not that old, but I mean, it's old for a football player, right? And it's not good. He's week to week right now, which is never a good sign. And it's not what you want to see when we had high hopes for that Rams passing attack with Puka now joined by Devontae Adams. So that's rough, man. I took Stafford pretty confidently in the 10th round of a couple startups, and I'm a little worried that he might just vanish.
Yeah, I mean, well, first I take offense because I think Matthew Stafford's like one of the only players that's actually older than me still in the NFL. So
Okay, so he's as old as me then.
no, but you know what? It's one of those things that it's like I'm not worried until like he starts missing something that matters to Matthew Stafford. I don't think training camp matters to Matthew Stafford anything until week 1. I think the most telling thing to me is McVay was like, yeah, he'll be there Monday, and then had to walk back in an interview like I don't know if he was grilled. I just heard the soundbite where he was like, oh, you know what? I might have jumped the gun saying he was going to be here Monday. He's actually going to be week to week. Like that seems like a really, really big step back. Like it's not like, oh guys, he's going to be here Monday. Actually, he's going to be here Wednesday. It was like, he's going to be here Monday. And now, you know what? I don't know when he's going to be here. It's going to be week to week. He is an older guy, so him getting training camp rest and not, but the scary thing to me is in season because he takes one bad hit and then you don't know what could happen, right? And you're back to the Jimmy G experience, and that's just horrible. So, and that kind of leads to the next person we're talking about Matthew Stafford with Puka. We don't know if he's quarterback proof. Like this next guy we're going to talk about, Justin Jefferson, another hammy tweak for Justin Jefferson. I think it was last season or 2 seasons ago, he missed 4 to 6 games with he ended up on IR with a hammy pull. He's good no matter who's the quarterback. I don't really care who it is. I'm pretty confident JJ McCarthy. But that's worrisome. Those soft tissue for wide receivers in camp, it tends to linger into the season. It tends to could be a problem. So he's definitely a guy that a lot of people are relying on, and that's a pretty big one to me.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, Justin Jefferson, you hate to see it. He's probably one of my favorite wide receivers to root for. He's just so good. And yeah, dealing with the tightness. I think I haven't heard anything about him coming back to practice yet, so I imagine he's still out. But yeah, this is interesting for me, especially given the news around I'm blanking right now. The wide receiver too, Jordan Addison,
Right.
and him, potentially missing a few games. That really opens up some spot starts. And when we'll talk about this in a little bit later, but the best ball dynasty streets, like Jalen Naylor becomes really an interesting ad because he's on waivers in a lot of leagues, or you could go get him for almost nothing. And he's almost guaranteed, I think, with Jordan Addison missing some games to get a few spot starts. And then you throw in this Justin Jefferson, soft tissue issue. And he might he might actually be a person to look at. And I've added him on some of my last picks in some seasonal best balls, just because I feel like that there's something opening it up. But more so, TJ Hawkinson wheels up. I think he's going to, take off this season. He could probably, get up to the top 2, top 3 tight ends pretty easily for a bounce back season. Yeah, any more you want to say on Jefferson before we move on here?
No, I think we're good to talk about the next guy.
Yeah, Joe Mixon. This guy, he had a walking boot, in OTAs, and no one was really concerned at the time, which I thought was weird. And now it's coming out that he's on the NFI, right?
Yeah.
With a foot injury, which he missed time last year with a foot injury. If it wasn't last year, it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's really not anyone else in that backfield other than Nick Chubb. So I don't know. Is there a bounce back season for Nick Chubb here? Where are you at with the rest of that backfield if Joe Mixon doesn't shine?
Yeah, man. I'm like pretty worried. I was worried about the Texans offense and kind of the hype after what we saw from the regression from CJ Stroud and just the horrible O-line play. Now you're telling me Nick Chubb, who's like 30 something after another brutal leg ACL tear that he suffered 2 seasons ago. I mean, he is 2 seasons removed when most people and most experts say you see that bounce back, but not when you're 30 something years old. Now, if somebody could do it, it would be a guy like Nick Chubb, who's like a freak athlete. But I'm extremely worried, and I'm extremely worried that how that not having Joe Mixon on the field affects CJ Stroud, how it affects the entire offense, how then that affects Nico Collins, the rookies that are there. So I don't know. I know they drafted a guy that's who shot up on sleeper pickups, but if this is a lasting thing, I could see them going to make a move, making maybe a trade or some sort of other move to add another body. But yeah, it's definitely worrying, and I'm pretty sure the Mixon injury was last year with his ankle, which I think is what it is now. Again, another ankle. So yeah, it's very worrisome. If I'm counting on Mixon, one of those old guys that are usually on competing rosters, I'm worried unless he was somebody that was just a depth piece. If he's somebody you were counting on and you're still trying to compete, I think you need to make an aggressive move now, and then he could be, your running back 4, running back 5. If he was somebody who you were planning to start regularly, I would be sounding all the alarm bells. All the projections say that he would maybe be ready for week 1 based on like reincidence of the ankle, how long he's been in the boot, the fact that they, shut him down. It's been all off season. He hasn't recovered from something from the off season. Yeah, so I would be panicking if Joe Mixon was somebody I was relying on my dynasty roster.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah, Woody Marks was the guy you're looking for, who they drafted, who's interesting. Right. And yeah, he did get shot up boards. Yeah, I guess what are you doing with him though? Like I think everyone's kind of spooked. Like I don't know if you could trade him for much. Like, would you rather have Joe Mixon or Zach Charbonnet?
Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, that is. Yeah, I mean, I don't. How do you go lower than that? I mean, would you rather have Braylon Allen or Joe Mixon with the hype that Braylon Allen's getting?
Yeah, I guess in that point, I'm still probably sticking with Mixon, but it's that low of a bar that you're setting. I honestly think if he's on your team and you're a contender and you didn't sell as somebody that was rebuilding, you're kind of stuck in a really bad spot and hope that he can bounce back in season so you can trade him. If you're a contender, I'm just thinking of him as an asset that's like not there. Like I wouldn't think of Joe Mixon somebody to count on until maybe halfway through the season, week 4. If I'm setting my lineup or I'm looking at my lineup, I'm trying to find somebody else. I don't think you can trade him for much, but I'm definitely trying to work around and just not have to count on. Yeah, you kind of have to. You're in that spot now.
Yeah, that's good. Oh, hold on. We got something coming in here. Breaking news on the spot. Hold on, let's see. got okay.
Oh
Jose,
no.
Jason's black polo Gonzalez twisted his ankle while walking over muddy concrete today. He's expected to land on the NFI any day now. The expectation is for him to be back up and running soon, but he's week to week. Oh, that's not good. It's a shame too, as he came into camp in the best shape of his life, showing out well. Man, Adam Schefter breaking the news here. You're looking pretty spry there, man. I look did they get it right?
Yeah, I think it's spot on. I mean, I wish I was in the best shape of my life coming into camp, but yeah, I mean that's definitely me there. I grew a few inches, got a little buff. No, but man, that was brutal. I do not recommend if you're in your 30s to be falling hard on concrete. I got a big old hematoma on my knee, twisted ankle, bum toe, and coming up this weekend, I have a vacation or a little weekend trip where I'm going to be doing like thousands of steps. So I'm just trying to recover to get in to be okay to be able to enjoy my vacation. We're going to be at Disneyland for a few days. So yeah, man, that was rough. I do not recommend for anybody listening if you're in your 30s and up. Just try not to be falling on concrete if you can
Maybe
avoid it.
maybe wear some shorts and bring some crutches. Maybe you can get to the front of the line.
Yeah, yeah. Freaking, you know how people are, they abuse that. So you can be in there in a wheelchair and they won't put you to the front of the line. You have to have like a medical exemption or something wild Disney does now. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, just hoping to heal up by then. That was my wife's first response was like, "Oh, are you gonna be okay for our trip?" And I'm like, "I don't know. It hurts so bad right now. I don't know what's gonna happen in 5, 6 days." But I mean, it's been getting better. I can walk, thankfully. No, doesn't seem like anything serious. But yeah,
All right.
appreciate Shefty breaking in here to break the news to y'all fine folks about my injuries.
No, I'm glad you're good, man. Yeah, stay well and good luck in Disneyland. All right, let's transition over into some stats and vibes. We're gonna talk about Najee Harris today, man. Um, Lead us off here. What's the vibes on Najee, man? It doesn't feel great.
Yeah, if for Najee the vibes are bad, like so bad, right? Like we heard about this. There was rumblings about some Najee Harris lost an eye, and everybody, at some point was like, "Is it that Najee Harris? No, it can't." Is then slowly things start trickling out. Yeah, he is. He's gonna miss camp, but he'll be back soon. Now Harbaugh comes out. We don't know when he's gonna come back. He's at practice with the biggest sunglasses I've ever seen. Like, the eye is an extremely sensitive area of your body. So, like, who knows? Like, I mean, obviously, I don't think he lost an eye, but this is one of those situations where it's like, the every single day that goes by that he misses is just on the other side of the coin. The vibes are just immaculate for Amari and Hampton, right? He was already drafted to be the guy. Najee Harris was maybe going to be in the way for half a season, at worst a full season in Dynasty. And every single day that he misses, Harbaugh probably just falls deeper in love with him, and so does a run heavy offense. So to me, coming out this year, I thought if Omarion Hampton landed in a good spot, which he did, now with Najee aside, I thought he could out perform Genti at least for this very first season, given that much better offense, much better O line. Kind of like last year, I thought Neighbors could outperform MSJ just based on talent and where they landed. So two sides of the vibes going for Najee. This is horrible. If you thought you had a running back, kind of like Mixon, if you were counting on Najee, I mean, maybe he comes back and he's fully healthy, but I mean, it doesn't seem like it with this whole thing with the eye. And maybe he just doesn't have a job when he comes back. They're not paying him a ton of money, and he might just have lost his spot to Omar and Hampton, a highly drafted rookie. And yeah, man, that's the vibes right now, man. It is not good.
Yeah, no, it's not. I mean, when you hear that he lost an eye and then just radio silence for like a week and a half, and then it comes out that he has a superficial eye injury, but then there's no pictures of him, and then when he is spotted, like you said, just masked and hooded, like that's not a good look. And then on top of that too, you look at the peripherals. They signed Naheem Hines. which is, like not a crazy signing, but it's a depth signing. And when you have a depth signing like that, it raises questions of, what was the motivation for adding that back to the backfield. So yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Like, I, is it wild to say that Najee just doesn't play this year? Like it might come to that.
Yeah, honestly, like if this was like I mean NFL's cutthroat, but if it was like even more so where like NFL teams didn't care, like it wouldn't be too surprising for him to have been like cut by now, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe because something serious did happen, or they're hoping surgeries or just time will let it heal, and so they're waiting. But the signing of another running back after you drafted and you paid Najee, and just the timeline of events is just weird. Like the agent puts out, it's a superficial, like obviously he can't come out and say something horrendous has happened if it has happened, which we don't know. And then Harbaugh comes out and says, we don't know when Nachi's coming. It's like just two completely different worlds. It's like CMC flashbacks all over again, guys. He's gonna be fine, and then he's got freaking tendonitis in both his, his Achilles, and he doesn't play most of the season. Like it's kind of that sort of feeling where you're just like, what in the world is going on, right? Like if had he at least shown up to practice and just been like normal and just whatever, okay, maybe even had like an eye patch, you could understand, oh okay, it's like hurt, you covering. But just the way he came out to practice, and we haven't seen, like you said, a single picture, man. It's bad. And it's like you're gonna get into the stats of Najee and Hampton and stuff, but like it's not like you were super excited about Najee anyways, right? You were excited because he was behind that O-line and a run first team or a run heavy team. But he's always been a plotter. You get 1,000 yards a season, but at what carry, what pace, like. So now this injury is like, what do you even can count on Najee for?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when he signed with the Chargers in the offseason, and like, that was a big signing. I had traded him away in one of my dynasty leagues previously. I was like, oh man, he just signed with the Chargers. Like, I kind of regret that. And it was kind of like people were trading pretty good capital for him at that moment. I mean, people weren't super excited because the contract didn't speak or say exciting things. I think it was like 5 million or maybe even less than that. It might have been like 3 million, something like that. And but he still, like you said, on a run first offense, great offensive line, and on a guy who's been a volume play, like what more could you ask for? Yeah, and like now they drafted Omari and Hampton, and it really felt like that meme of the guy with the girlfriend walking down the street and he's looking back at the other girl, and that's Omari and Hampton because you're like, okay, Omari and Hampton. But yeah, man, Najee is he's good. He's not great, but good. I think we had a lot of hope for him because of his rookie season where he was running back 6 in points per game. Did you know he had 74 receptions that year?
No, Najee's rookie season also feels like an eternity ago. I don't even know when he was a rookie. 6 years ago. I mean, in NFL terms, that feels like forever.
It was only 2021, so it was only 4 years ago. I know, right? It's hard to believe, but yeah, that 74 receptions, I was like, like that's wild. Like you don't get wide receivers with that many receptions. And then outside of that, though, he's been outside the top 24 in fantasy points per game in the last 2 seasons, and even in that sophomore season, he was like running back 17 in fantasy points per game. So, I mean, in his career, he's had 3.98 yards per carry. Okay, good, not great. 2.21 yards created per carry, which again, that's that stat that we're talking about. That's really sticky for running backs and who the elite ones are. And he had a 4% breakaway run rate, which again, good, not bad. And breakaway run rate is how many percentage of their carries were going for 10 yards or more. So, 4 out of every 100 runs, he was going for 10 yards or more. So if he had like 250 carries, he's doing that 10 times a season. Not great. Like, but again, that's good. And that's just kind of the story of Najee. It's just good, but not great. And he's made a living in fantasy off of volume in that Pittsburgh Steelers offense. So now we get him hurt, injured, and the narrative is spinning towards Omarion Hampton. And I loved Omarion Hampton coming in. He was my favorite. I think, early in the draft season, there was a lot of talk between Omarion Hampton and Caleb Johnson as the number two guy. And as the combine happened, that separation, was a lot bigger. But I didn't really see it with Caleb Johnson to begin with, and I was always on Marion Hampton. He's 6 foot with 221. It's actually really similar to Najee, their builds. He had a 111 speed score, which again, really similar to Najee. I think Najee had a 106 speed score, which a 111 for a guy at 220 pounds is pretty insane for a guy that size. Omarion Hampton in his college career, though, had 5.08 yards created per carry, which was number 4 in this class. I think Najee coming in was like 4.4 yards created per contact, or yards per carry, yards created per carry. So a difference in their prospect profile there. Najee also had, 0.41 missed tackles forced per carry, which was again number 4, and that showed up on the tape. I mean, that guy was hard to tackle. You couldn't get him down. And what I look for in running backs too when I'm watching is I like the guys that when they get hit and they know they're going down, they'll spin and lunge forward, to get that extra yard or 2 yards, or whatever it may be. Like that's, to me, like that's a really good sign of a guy who's going to make it, because they're fighting for that yardage. And he did that. Who else did that? Dylan Sampson, which is why I was high on him. But yeah, he landed on the Chargers, in the first round. It's a great fit for run first mentality, an excellent O-line. And coming in without the Najee injury, I mean, we all kind of knew Najee was just going to be, a thorn in his side. But I mean, Omarion Hampton is the guy. And it's hard to see him not getting a bulk of the share by the season end. And now with the Najee news of him maybe not playing or at least not starting this season, Omarion Hampton to the moon. I mean, it's pretty easy. And I think he's a steal in redraft right now. He's going in the third or fourth round. And I think you can build an anchor around him and draft that top end wide receiver, maybe even get a tight end, and then come back and take Omarion Hampton and feel good about it. Yeah, it's wheels up for him, and I'm happy to have a couple of shares of him. I know you have at least one share of him too. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a couple. It's that I had to make a trade for him in a league where my running backs were getting pretty old, but I was still looking to contend. So I kind of packaged a few pieces to go get him. Yeah, man. I mean, he kind of just reminds me a little bit of Marshawn Lynch. He's a little bit taller, but about in the same like size, and he just has that like meanness, toughness that you want in a running back to really make those big plays. And like you said, the speed score is crazy. Where if he gets into the open field, it's not like someone's gonna maybe catch him. He's probably gone. So yeah, I'm all over it. I love it. I have no Najee, so for all intents and
Same.
purposes, like if he's not anything, then so be it. I'll be very happy for Hampton. But yeah, man. Are you ready? You think we move on to the next segment?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about some Bestball Dynasty. And it's a good time to be a new podcaster as I mess up the overlay here from last year. Yeah, tell me, man, what do you like about Bestball Dynasty? What is it, and how is it different?
Yeah, I mean the Best Ball Dynasty, so it's transactional dynasty league, kind of like the ones you're most people are familiar with, but it's just best ball. So now you don't have to worry about setting that lineup. I think it lends itself to a different strategy. It's still head-to-head matchups, You still have daily waiver wire if you need it. Obviously, it's a dynasty league, so it's a little bit harder to find anything there. But yeah, it's different because it's best ball, so you don't have IR spots like you would. You normally don't have taxi because I mean, there's uh, I don't think Sleeper even allows it, and it wouldn't really make sense because I don't know how they would make that work. But it focuses on a lot about building depth, which I think is what you were wanting to mostly talk about. Like, what does that mean? Like, it's not just like, oh, I have two running back spots, so I need like a third running back in case one gets hurt, like in a lineup league or in dynasty because you have bigger benches. So you might have like an RB4. It's like, it's a I think a total different roster construction than it is for a normal dynasty league.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I think a lot of people may not understand, it's different from regular best ball where it's there's head-to-head matchups. You're not just playing for best score, at least in a lot of the leagues that we're playing. Um, and there's transactions, which is the one of the biggest changes and additions to it. But yeah, the no IR spots is interesting. Okay, I kind of wanted to touch on those two things, the no IR spots and the no taxi slots, before we get into the big part where you don't set your lineup. Um, but the injured players actively hurt your lineup, because they cost a roster spot. And what we'll talk about in a little bit is, instead of having a starting lineup, you have a pool of players that enter that starting lineup. So if you take one of those spots to roster an injured player, that's one less player in your pool to enter your lineup, which actively hurts you if you're competing. Which inversely, if you're rebuilding, that's great to have, as long as that injured player is coming back in good health and is a good player type of thing. So um, it's nice to kind of have that dynamic in the dynasty or in the best ball, because you can get a lot of trades done that way, especially in season too. Like as soon as you get an injured guy and you're just like, oh man, like I'm 8-2, I'm looking for a playoff spot. And this guy just got injured. Let me try to flip him for, a tier down player, and so that way I can compete this year. And those trades get done because the tier down player is on a rebuilding team. So it's a good way to maintain an edge in any situation. So if you're a rebuilder or competing, um, yeah. Anything you want to add on that before we kind of move on to the taxi slots part?
No, I mean that yeah, that sounds
Okay.
pretty straightforward. Yeah, that's
Yeah, the
go ahead.
the no taxi slots is again similar dynamic there, where you can't really bank or draft those kinds of developmental players as easily. Um, they take up roster spots again. So like if you're trying to grab like an Egbuka who is NFL ready, but coming in behind Godwin and Evans, or like a JSN or an Odunze, in those previous years, like it's hard to roster those guys if you're a competing team. It's a really minor effect, but it makes a difference. It does make a really big difference. Um, and then on top of that too, you need to have that foresight, even more so than in a lineup league, when you're looking at how many draft picks you have versus how many roster slots you have available for those guys. Um, that's always good practice in any dynasty league, is to kind of look ahead for how many draft picks you have and count the spots that you have available. But especially in best ball, where you can consolidate those assets into better players, and not have to worry about um, rostering, one of those developmental guys, or like a backup running back or something like that. Taking those picks while they're still fluid, and doesn't have a name assigned to the pick, is a good way to have strategic foresight. I don't know if you think about that, or if you found any kind of impact in that, or in best ball leagues versus your lineup leagues.
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, the like if you draft over the roster spots or whatever, I think it's not that big of a deal because I mean, in Dynasty, there's always guys hanging on the edge of your bench, even in best ball ones that you're like, this guy can probably drop over, a rookie who has a chance. Amir Abdullah has been in the league 3 years. Like I could probably safely drop him like over keeping one of these guys, like one of these rookies in the later rounds. So in terms of that, but I mean, I think the having the strategic foresight to like always be consolidating assets, always be looking to churn the bottom of that roster spot, or of those bottom rosters is really important. And you don't have the ability to just like, oh, quickly, here are my fourth round rookies. I'm throwing three of them in taxi, and then I can go pick up other guys. It's like you have to be a little bit more cognizant and a little bit more mindful of how you're using those slots and in what position you're in. Because if you're like you said, like if you're somebody competing, you don't want those spots filled with dudes that are not going to be scoring points regularly, right? Because that hurts your lineup. You need a big pool of a lot of players, as we're going to talk about.
Yeah, yeah. Not setting your lineup is such a subtle but huge change that really ripples out in many different ways. And like we've been talking about at the core, the biggest differences is not having to set that starting roster, but rather managing that pool of players that can enter your lineup. That one dynamic changes so that you're essentially hunting for spike weeks, right? And it also kind of makes it more so than a regular dynasty league, a lineup league, like a week to week game, where you're hunting waiver wires to pick up anybody who's seen the field, and trying to put 8 points, 10 points on your roster that can hit it. We play in a league that has 11 starters, Toclan, where you have quarterback, two running back, three wide receivers, tight end, three flex, and then you have a bench of 19 players, so a total of 30 roster spots total. Managing that roster becomes a priority for a competitor or someone who's competing in a dynasty, best ball dynasty. Um, and I do like to think about it on a week to week basis, because if you've ever followed Scott Connor, who is, I think he's a great dynasty mind. He talks a lot about his content in terms of portfolio playing. He plays in crazy amounts of leagues, but the core of what he's saying is actually really helpful. And he does a whole best ball roster construction series. I'll plug it in the comments. But he says, optimal for, and he goes through it almost exactly our league settings. They have a 1.75 tight end premium rather than 1.5. But optimal is to roster 5 quarterbacks, 7 running backs, 13 wide receivers, and 5 tight ends. Yeah, the wide receivers are kind of shocking, but it makes sense. It does make sense, because when you have 3 wide receiver spots that you need to fill regularly, and then you have 3 flexes that you need to fill, 42% of those flexes are 42% of the time those flexes are going to be filled by a wide receiver. So that means you're going to have 4 to 5 wide receivers hit your lineup on any given week. And if you multiply 4 to 5 by 12, that's the top 48 to top 60 wide receivers that are hitting lineups. So if you just take the bare minimum of the top 50 wide receivers in play, that kind of puts it in perspective of what wide receivers or what players are actually relevant in Bestball Dynasty. Um, I went back and I looked at it. I went on the 2024 season. I went through every week and I looked at the wide receiver 50 and what they scored, and I did it the same for the wide receiver 36. And on average, that player scored the wide receiver 50 scored 6.2 fantasy points per game, and the wide receiver 36 scored 8.9 fantasy points per game. So if I told you like all you need is someone to score 6 points to hit your lineup, that it kind of feels weird, right?
Yeah, I mean, it opens a much wider range of pool of players that you need to be thinking, considering about. Like, I know for myself and 2 years ago in the championship, um, both me and one of the other league mates who won the championship had players hit their lineup that they picked up because of people that were sitting or whatever that played in week 17 that are normally not like people that will hit lineups or we picked up that week, like Odeus Sakic, the wide receiver that was playing for the
Olamide
Commanders.
Zacchaeus.
Yes, he made my championship roster, scoring like 13 points and going into a flex. While I had Cooper Cup scored 2 or whatever it was because he was on that horrible thing. So I think instead of spending your time agonizing over setting lineups, right? Because it's best ball, you spend that time constructing that bottom of your roster, that those backup guys. I like to think of them as just backups to my starters, right? I set in my mind the starting lineup of if everything goes perfect, these are the guys that are going to make my lineup. Obviously, almost every week it doesn't happen because not every week does every player do what they're supposed to do. And then I just think of how many backup options do I have? If I'm sitting there as a contender and I don't have 4 to 5 good options as backups to hit a specific slot, I feel like I'm in trouble, and that's one thing I had to learn from one year to another, is that big difference of needing that those multiple bites at the apple. You don't want in Dynasty, when you're setting a lineup, if you have like 4, 5, 6 guys at the bottom of your roster who are barely seeing the field because you're waiting for this, for that, that's fine. But in this best ball format, you really don't want to have those guys. Even if it's a worse player, technically, if you're contending, you want the guy that's has the chance, like you said, to at least score 6, 7, 8 points. And in the leagues that we've been in, and they kind of have similar formats, that flex, those 3 flexes, the second and third flex is normally getting filled by a guy like you said, like someone scoring anywhere from 8 to 11 points. And that's not normally when you're thinking of a lineup, right? You're thinking, oh man, those 3 flexes, I need them to be guys that are still going to score like 15 points plus, right? Like you're trying to really build, but in a league with 12 other managers that are trying to do the same thing, it becomes really hard to build that, right? Nobody can. So you have to try to work the edges of those available players, right? Like a wide receiver 3 means a lot more in this best ball format, as you've said, and even wide receiver 4s than any other format, right? Because you will need them. One of these random weeks, Quentin Johnson's going to score 13 points, and you're going to be really glad you had him over another player because or a third string running back on a team that 2 years from now you think is going to take over because um, he actually entered your lineup and is a usable, valuable asset to you now.
Yeah, no, and on that same note too, like I think that's why running backs and quarterbacks, like when we're talking about filling those positions, it's so important to have those guys just have safe, reliable volume and to have, you know, I don't know, like 1.5 times what you actually need of those starters. So like if you're doing a super flex, right? I would say if you're wanting to compete, you need like 3 quarterbacks that can reliably hit that quarterback spot. And then on top of that, like I think it should go farther, right? You should be looking to pick up those quarterbacks that are backups and filling in for a week. For example, Malik Willis last year. Jordan Love missed 2 games early in the season. Malik Willis came in and put up like 18 and 20 points per game. And you could probably pick him up off the waiver in a lot of leagues. Or if not, like you could trade it. I was trying to trade him in one of our leagues, and I would have taken a fourth for him because that's all I was trying to do was to to get some sort of capital so that I could, try and do something with that later. And we'll talk about that later about how draft capital, those lower end draft capital picks become much more valuable in these leagues for that reason. You're trying to buy weeks and you're trying to put those guys on your roster that will hit those spots. Because you never know. You never know when Malik Willis is going to pop up for 20 points or, what's that guy's name? Browning, the backup for Joe Burrow.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, and he'll put up points. Or yeah, Daniel Jones will come in for AR this year, right? Like there's a ton of times where that's actually gonna happen. Yeah, and going back to like competing and the roster size and how you're saying like you like to have those backups, like I think a general rule of thumb is you're competing when you have, probably about two times the starting lineup of players that can actually get you to those like 10, 11 points per game or more. So like if we start 11, I'm looking for 22 starters that are going to hit that lineup, any given week. And I would probably say like you want 22 guys within like the top 130 players. If you think about it, right, if you have 11 starters and 12 teams, you want the top 132 players. And if you can have 22 of those guys in the top 130, you're looking really good, really, really good. I don't think you need that. I think that's ideal and probably optimal. But you can fill in those if you only have 16 or 17 of those. You can fill in the rest of those with just like you said, grinding the waivers and trading fourths for these guys that don't normally have dynasty value, but they do in best ball leagues because of what they offer production wise for a spike week and how they can hit your lineup.
Yeah, 100%. I think that trying to shoot for that number is what you um, should try to obtain when you're competing, because you don't want to find yourself with a great starting lineup in what would be a great starting lineup in a lineup league, and then when the CeeDee Lamb and the Saquon Barkley doesn't hit like they're supposed to, you'd be left with not a good option to go to. So I completely agree. I think the way I've built the teams that I've had that have been competing have been try to acquire what I consider an ace, like the an elite talent in a position. So whether it's a Josh Allen, a CeeDee Lamb, a Saquon Barkley, and then everything else, not be so worried about having like I have a lineup league where my starting three wide receivers are Justin Jefferson, Nico Williams, and Puka Nakua. But the wide receiver depth after that is pretty shaky, pretty bad. But that's a lineup league where you can, that's really all that matters, right? Because the other person across from you has to make those start-sit decisions as well. And so I would never kind of have that in a dynasty best ball, because it's just, unless you have tons of depth at behind, it's just not worth it, because they're not all three going to hit, especially wide receivers who we know tend to have more up and down games, more volatility in their play. So I think what you said is pretty astute. Like shoot for double the amount of starters. And then the flexes can kind of, you can lean heavier running back or heavier wide receiver, depending on what, you're just able to acquire either in the draft or through trades.
Yeah, no, and I like what you were saying about, having those top guys. Like if you had Puka, Nico, and JJ in a best ball league, like yeah, that's still really good. But the problem is like to acquire those guys, you probably had to consolidate a lot of assets to get them on your team. So like you said, like your depth is lacking. And you're in that same vein, like those type of players, they they're watered down, they're diluted in Best Ball Dynasty, for that reason, because the sole purpose, or I guess the main benefit of having them is like having that locked in starter. And in Best Ball Dynasty, we don't have to make starting decisions like that. We don't get that benefit of having that. They still bring the benefit of a reliable floor and a huge ceiling, which matters in best ball for a couple of reasons, right? You have the reliable floor that you know that they're going to hit your lineup, enter your lineup, 10 to 14 times in a season. And the ceiling that they offer can make up for it when you don't have a player hit that, 8 points per game or 10 points per game threshold, right? If you have Jamar Chase who puts up 50 points in a week, that's like starting 3 players in one, and your depth behind him matters a little bit less now because Jamar Chase just made up for 3 of your starting spots right there. So that's why I like to think about them as it gives your roster construction a little more flexibility and what type of guys you're rostering on your team. Um, it it just allows you to build the team a little bit differently and a little more dirty when you have those guys in your lineup. You don't need them. You absolutely don't need them. And if you go back and you listen to Scott Connor about this, like he talks about this exact same thing. Um, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the relevant players here, um, and how there's a wider range of relevant players um, hitting our lineups, um, which we talked about. Like it has tangential effects. Like we said, like the later round draft capital becomes more valuable. One thing we haven't mentioned is how fab becomes more valuable, especially in season fab. If you have in season versus off season fab, managing your fab throughout the season in a best ball dynasty is a huge component of making sure you're equipped to build that roster construction week to week, because injuries happen and suspensions happen, and you really got to make sure that these players that are seeing the field in those weeks are on your team so that you can get them. Um, yeah, and I think a couple of tips here too about best ball dynasties and kind of roster construction. Those boom bust type players, they're a lot more valuable. Guys like Jordan Addison or Jamison Williams. Um, those guys are gold because they offer a safe floor, not as good as those top tier guys, but they also offer a ceiling which is just as good as those top tier guys. Tiering down into multiple assets is really, really, really valuable in best ball because, like we said, depth is king in best ball. So and it's actually really hard to do. People are sharp, like they know that is the idea of best ball is to have that depth. So tearing down off of players and getting multiple assets for one asset, that's also why those top players don't really hold a lot of value either, is because like when you want to trade Josh Allen for Patrick Mahomes and Jamison Williams and I don't know, Kenneth Walker. Like it's a lot harder to get that done because people know like, oh, like yeah, Josh Allen's a difference maker, but I'm also giving up these other 3 bites at the apple, like we're saying. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think with the tearing up and down is I kind of just have began to think about it as like a kind of like a math equation. Like depending, obviously, there's some other things to take into account, but the one thing that I did last off season, I know there was in the chat after the trade went down, people were like, "Oh, that's kind of." I traded Jalen Hurts in the Superflex, the Toclan League, for Jameer Gibbs and Jared Goff. And my mentality was I already had Josh Allen. Like, yeah, having Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts is awesome. But at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure Jared Goff and Jameer Gibbs will just outscore week to week what Jalen Hurts can do. So that's how I think about those assets. The reason I do like to keep them is because when you're going to go into competing, and especially into the playoffs, you're going to run into those guys. And so you need one. The way I view those kind of top assets is one, they are the safe floor, but like you said, they can make up for when other people fail, right? So if you have the player that scores 35 points, Josh Allen scores 35 points, 40 points, now he can make up for a wide receiver that doesn't do so well. Even if you have a bunch of backups, right? He can make up that point differential. And when you go into the playoffs, you're not going to be running into, bad teams or teams that have don't have those players, right? Like those players, even in dynasty best balls, they are still what ends up carrying a lot of people, right? If you have a Burrow Chase stack that goes off like last year, it's probably carrying you to the playoffs on most weeks. If you have a Lamar Jackson, a Saquon Barkley, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, like those guys are probably, if they're performing to their top 5 level, they're probably still going to carry. So you're going to need to offset that, right? Like if my tight end room is weak and I'm playing against a Trey McBride, Brock Bowers team, I need to have the firepower to offset Bowers' 30-point game with my other player, right? So depth is king to an extent, right? Like you still need, like, you don't want 14 Khalil Shakirs on to make up your 14 wide receivers, right? You need a little bit of mix up in there, but it's definitely more important, right? Like most situations, like I've been mulling over trading Jalen Waddle for Stephon Diggs and Khalil Shakir in the Tokeland League, where I have lack of wide receiver depth, and I've been going back and forth on it simply because it's taking on a lot of age and going away from an asset that in the future, or in the near future, could be better. But in my mind, it's that game of how many times is Waddle going to hit my lineup, and how many times could the other two guys together hit my lineup to score more points. And so that's the kind of gearing up and down, I think, that is easier to do with those kind of middle range players than the top assets, because nobody, unless it's for a bunch of picks, nobody really wants to pay up what it takes to get a Genti, Bijan Robinson, a Chase, either up or down. Like most people are just too smart, like you said.
Yeah, no, that's a sharp trade, especially when you think about it's risky, right? Because I mean, the Stephon Diggs part of it, and with the ACL injury coming back from it, and him being older, it's harder. But I mean, if he stays healthy, he's gonna provide Jalen Waddle production, if not more. And then on top of that, you get a reliable starter in Khalil Shakir, who will probably give you, I don't know, 8 starts in a year and hit in your lineup. So yeah, I think that's a really sharp trade, especially for a contender. Like you're saying. Yeah, I love Dynasty Best Ball. It's probably one of my favorite formats. I think also a misconception about Best Ball too is that it's a lot less work than a Dynasty lineup, and that's probably true come Sunday morning. Like it's you don't got to sit there setting all your lineups, but it's a lot more work in following news and understanding who's relevant. Because if they're seeing the field and they're seeing snaps, they need to be rostered, and vice versa, right? If someone is not seeing the field or got demoted, or like those guys don't even if they have regular dynasty value in another lineup league, like they need to be on a rebuilding team or they need to be on the waiver wire.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a great league to the format to have in your portfolio. It gives you the dynasty. It gives you a little bit, I think, of like what you're saying, a little deeper edge of like if you're paying attention in May, April, when a lot of people, even in dynasty, I have dynasty leagues that go silent for 3 months, 4 months until it's time to do the rookie draft. I think with the baseball aspect, you can mine a lot more out of those, being locked in throughout the whole year. For me personally, I love the grind of setting lineups. I don't know why. I think it gives you an edge as well if you pay attention to to actual football, but I think the best ball dynasty aspect is great to have in a portfolio because you can add a few more leagues, get that draft every couple of years, maybe once a year, add a league because you get that new ADP. You can draft some different players, and still have a dynasty aspect, still do the trades, but then you don't have to add into your workload of setting a lineup. You can add workload when there is a lot less workload in during training camps and off season and stuff.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, it's hard for me to switch gears between best ball and lineup, and a lot of that just comes to like when I'm dissecting trades and stuff. Like I'll catch myself in a lineup league being like, "Oh, this guy's going to be relevant this year. Like I need to put him on my roster." And then I look at my roster, I'm like, "I'm never going to start this guy. There's no way I'm starting him over these players. Like, what's
Right.
the point in making that trade?" But in a best ball league, it's worthwhile. Like you want those guys on your team that are relevant and could spike in any given week, and you don't have to make that startup decision or that lineup decision on them. So it's hard. It's really hard for me to switch gears. I think my mind naturally goes to best ball. That's just where we started, or where I started in
Right.
Dynasty, and that's just kind of how I go. But yeah, man, do you have any closing thoughts here on the Best Ball Dynasty before we go to the outro?
No, bro. No, man. For me, that's we kind of did a great summarization. For those of you who haven't played, I would definitely suggest hopping in, get in. I think it's the flavor of ice cream that's going to be popular here in the next couple years. And if you're listening to us and you just in general dynasty best ball content, you're going to be ahead of the curve because I don't think it's caught on yet, but I think it is the big wave coming.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and if you guys ever have any questions or anything, feel free to throw them into the comments. We can respond there. You guys can hit us up on Twitter. Um, Follow us there. Um, Give us a like. Um, Make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. We're going to be dropping episodes every other week here. Lots more to come out of us. And thanks for sitting in and listening with us. Jose, sign us off, man.
Yeah, guys, as always, future first podcast for you guys here. Me and Jmac holding it down. Appreciate you guys listening. Much love to y'all, and we're out.
See you guys.